Football at 4 segment, powering through 8 South Jersey counties and North Delaware with John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. He joins us now, talk a little football here on 97.3 ESPN. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. I'm big in Middleton, Delaware.
Oh, yeah?
No, I have no idea.
The YouTube statistics suggest that Middleton is a big area for football at 4. No,
there we go.
Here we go. So we got a lot going on. Now, did Eagle OTAs continue today, or they have a day off?
Well, we're not in there. It is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so they'll be off tomorrow.
Right.
But we only have access one day a week. So from the media standpoint, we'll be back next Tuesday.
All right. So there you go. So not a whole heck of a lot happening there today. But what is happening, it's that time of the year. We're getting ready for mini camps, training camps, and then, of course, the lists are out. And your list, the Sporting News list of the top NFL coaches was released. Now, earlier in the week, there was a list of the top GMs, which I saw, and I have it in my notes to talk about. But since the OTAs actually had stuff going on the field, I haven't gotten to it. And now the Sporting News put their list of the top head coaches. Now, I always find the NFL head coaching ranking to be very interesting because so many times we say it's Bill Belichick and then who's number 2. And I think you could ask 10 different people, John, and get 10 different answers at number 2. Now, the Sporting News went with boy wonder Sean McVay, and you don't have him in your top 5.
No, I think the Super Bowl, and even Sean himself acknowledged that he was badly outcoached in the Super Bowl by Bill Belichick. Now, there's no, obviously, embarrassment in that. You're going to tend to be outcoached by Bill Belichick, but he was badly outcoached. And you just have to go back 1 year and see Doug Pederson in the same game. Not saying he outcoached Bill Belichick, but the Eagles won the game, and he certainly wasn't embarrassed. So that's one comparison point for one coach that is in my top 5 and one that isn't. And then I don't think there should be, and I've said this a lot, and there really isn't around the NFL. There's really not a lot of difference with number 2. Most people in the league would say Andy Reid pretty convincingly. We all know the issues here in Philadelphia. And interesting where he sort of made his reputation around this league, and we talk about his coaching tree all the time. He's probably less respected here than anywhere else. It's weird.
Yeah, you have Andy number 2. I think there's a lot of people that kind of default to Andy, and you're right. Around here, it's like, how dare you put Andy? He couldn't win the Super Bowl. He's lost a lot of the big games. Even in Kansas City, he still has a similar, mantra from the fans is that he just can't win that big game, even when he has the better team. But I don't know that you can definitively put anybody else there. I guess here, some people would say, look, Doug has already won a Super Bowl, but the 3 years, is that what holds you back?
Yeah, I mean, I do think longevity is a part of it, and Doug hasn't been around that long, but I do have him at number 4 overall. I think he's deserving. I think he's proven himself as a coach, not only in the Super Bowl year in a lot of ways. I say all the time, I thought he was even better last year. And if you think about the hurdles he had to overcome when he was 7-9, you could say the Super Bowl season was his worst season from a coaching standpoint. I talk about sliding scales all the time and how you rate coaches. You're supposed to maximize what you have. I think he's done a phenomenal job all 3 years here in Philadelphia, and he's on his way, and I think he deserves to be in that top 5. I don't think there's any question about that, but I do think you have to pay a little deference to longevity. That's why I put Ron Rivera in the top 10. He's been doing it for a long time. Mike Tomlin, I got a lot of I mean, that guy, he's got 8 10-win seasons. He's obviously won a Super Bowl. And think about this, Mike. Obviously, the Steelers are known for their continuity, and they've had 3 coaches over a 50-year period. 3 coaches. All 3 have won a Super Bowl. But if you talk to people in Pittsburgh, it's sort of like Andy Reid in here. They'll say, Chuck Noll, obviously a Hall of Famer. He's got 4. Bill Cowher, tremendous respect for him. And they look at Mike Tomlin, maybe because of the issues with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. Mike Tomlin has won at a better clip than Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher. It's pretty amazing, his record and what he's been able to accomplish.
Well, so, and I also think
another guy.
He has had moments. He's had moments too where they've lost games where people thought they should have won.
Well, everybody has.
Oh, of course.
I mean, in New England, they will say, how do you lose that game against the Eagles in Super Bowl 52? I mean, when you're expected to win, that says you're pretty good to begin with. When people expect that kind of success out of you. And then secondly, if you're going to put everybody under the microscope, I also did my GM ratings. That created a lot of stir. People are pointing out 1 first-round pick out of GMs that have been in the job for 14 years. Everybody misses. And the longer you're around, those odds increase.
Let's look. So we'll compare. You have Belichick 1. They have Belichick 1. This is the Sporting News 2019 NFL head coaching rankings. So you have Andy Reid 2. They have Sean McVay 2. You have Pete Carroll 3, and they went with Sean Payton. Now Payton, won a Super Bowl. They've been pretty good. They've had a couple up and down years since the Super Bowl. But Pete Carroll's interesting, very consistent. Won a Super Bowl. Those guys are always seemingly in the mix as well for that number 2 spot. You have them at 3, but you have Payton at 7.
Yeah. Well, and some people got their back up about that as well, some Saints fans, and they were and they said, why? And I said, look, the guy had that 3-year stretch, and really it was 4 years because he was banned because of the Bountygate scandal for 1 year, where the Saints were 7-9. So they were in Jeff Fisher territory for a long time. And the problem with that is, look, as I just said, it's a sliding scale. You have to maximize what you have, and you don't have a ton of talent. But this is a guy who, throughout that whole period, had a first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. There's no way you can go 7-9, 7-9, 7-9 with Drew Brees. You should be able to get to 9 wins at least in 1 or 2 of those seasons. So that's why I knocked him down.
Well, what's the Giants' problem? They have a Hall of Fame quarterback. They can't get a winning record.
That's not. No, they don't. No, they don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback. Drew Brees is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Eli Manning is not. Now, I'm not. In the case of Sean Payton, I still have him rated number 7. He's a good coach. I just don't think he belongs in the rarefied air of somebody with the tremendous consistency of Andy Reid or even Pete Carroll, for that matter.
You have Doug Pederson at number 4. They have Andy Reid. You have Mike Tomlin, number 5. They went with Pete Carroll. Where you both agree is John Harbaugh at number 6.
Yeah, I think he's a guy who doesn't get enough credit. And by the way, you see all these names that have that are from the Andy Reid tree, by the way. That's part of the reason why Andy's number 2. So many coaches have developed under him to become good coaches themselves. John's obviously in that category. He's won a Super Bowl. He had that tremendous run of not only making the playoffs, but the Ravens would win a game every year when they got there as well. And that's very, very difficult to do. So a lot of the theme is consistency. And if you're good over a long period of time, that's a pretty good indication you're a good coach.
Another guy, and by the way, exactly what when you said that, I thought the same thing. Harbaugh, Eagles, Pederson, Reid, Rivera, who you have on your list. At one point, Sean Payton coached with the Eagles as well, people forget. So there's a lot of Eagle ties on both lists here. Number 7, you have Sean Payton. They have Doug Pederson at number 7. Now, obviously, you think that's too low because you have him at number 4, but it's evident that Doug Pederson is shooting up lists, and maybe they're holding him back for longevity. I don't know, but 7 seems to be if you're looking at the other guy, I don't know how they have McVay too. I can see the other guys are saying, hey, longevity, but McVay doesn't have the longevity. If you're putting him above Pederson, I find that to be that there's something about McVay that it seems like the NFL is trying to prop him up. We were talking before, it's like the sex sell things that the NFL wants this good-looking young guy to be the face of their profession.
Yeah, I don't think it's the NFL. It's there's no question a lot of the owners in this league look at him as the template for a coach, and they do want that young guy. And we talk about it all the time, but these, as you mentioned, are the sporting news ratings. So I think a lot of it is sort of hype and sizzle in the fact that he looks the way he looks. His girlfriend looks the way she looks. I don't know if they're married yet, but all of that plays into it. The fact that he's the so-called boy wonder, and so many people do. And we joke all the time when they want to interview people. Do you know Sean McVay? Did you coach him? Did you have coffee with him? Have you met him at all? So that plays into it. And, longevity, again, part of the reason, I'll be honest, part of the reason Doug is as high on my list, I don't have a problem if people want to put him at 7 or 8. I'm around him every day. I see the job he does. So I kind of know what kind of coach he is and how he's handled the situation from day one. Everybody else doesn't get to see that. Maybe somebody in Los Angeles who's around Sean McVay has that tremendous view of him. From a national standpoint, though, I do think there's some sizzle there. And he got exposed a little bit at the hands of Bill Belichick. And I'll go to that example again. Doug did not. And, oh, by the way, Doug Pederson is 2-0 against Sean McVay. And both games were in Los Angeles. In both games, he was crippled by injuries. One, Carson Wentz got hurt in-game.
Yeah, I know. And Pederson has beaten McVay head-to-head, on the road multiple times. So it just seems that all the boxes check for Pederson over McVay there. And so I don't think you're being biased there. I think that's being very fair. Now, they have you have McVay you have Payton 7, you have McVay number 8. So you're not selling the guy short. He's had a couple of very good years, but longevity and the fact that he's lost some big games. So you have him number 8. They have Mike Tomlin number 8. Now you went with Mike Zimmer number 9, and he's an interesting guy. There was a guy last year that some people thought might have been fired.
Yeah, and that's because of the expectations, and that's kind of defines good coaches. If you have big expectations, and the Vikings did last year, they had a lot of problems on the offensive line. He's made the playoffs on numerous occasions. He was in the NFC Championship game. He's had a top 5 defense for 3 consecutive years. I think he's a top 10 coach. And Ron Rivera was my number 10, and those are more veteran guys. And there's Matt Nagy's a perfect example of somebody who was phenomenal, but I did not put him in the top 10 because it's 1 year, and I want to see what he does in his second year. And by the way, that's another Andy Reid guy who could be in the top 10 as early as next year. If the Bears continue to play well with a first-place schedule and with teams adjusting to him, I think that's a clear indication he'll be a top 10 coach. But I do think you have to wait a little bit.
You've got Ron Rivera at 10, and their last two are interesting. Anthony Lynn from the Chargers and Frank Reich already in there. 1 year under his belt. He's a top 10 coach in the league.
Yeah, and that's because of the turnaround. And very similar to what I just said about Matt Nagy, you could put Frank Reich and Anthony Lynn in that category as well. I just think it's too early in their tenures. They're all good coaches, and if they continue to perform at the level they have been, they'll be in that top 10 pretty quickly. And Frank would be another guy who technically is from Doug's tree, but Doug comes from Andy's tree. So you can see it developing. It's just Andy Reid, Andy Reid, Andy Reid.
Now, you say the gap between 1 and 2 is very big, between Belichick and Reid. I think we always say that. In the NFL, Belichick's number 1, who's number 2? I think it's similar with we talk about the NBA a lot. Like it's Popovich number one, and then there's just a bunch of guys that are kind of in the conversation for number two there. And, that's similar with the NBA. Belichick is running away. He's the best guy, not even anybody close.
No, and I think it's even a bigger gap than the NBA. I think it's gargantuan. He does things no other coach does. And I've said it on the show a number of times. I think it's amazing. Everybody in this league tries to copy everybody else, except Bill Belichick. And people always question when I say that, and they say, well, no. I mean, people have hired coaches in the past all over the place, and largely they've been unsuccessful. The latest to try will be Brian Flores this year in Miami. You had Matt Patricia last year, obviously. You've had a ton of these Patriots assistants around the league, but they don't have the confidence in themselves to copy what Bill does with the Patriots. And as I said, last year was probably the perfect example, because if you watch the Patriots week 1 or week 2 versus week 17 and into the playoffs, they completely morphed their personality. It was the typical modern NFL, throwing the football all over the place. And by the time it was over, they're playing old school football with a fullback and rushing for 200 yards and taking advantage of all the D-backs on the field. It's pretty amazing. And if you remember that Baltimore game a number of years ago where John Harbaugh, another top 10 coach, lost his mind with those formation tricks, that's the kind of things Bill Belichick does. Nobody else does. And the most impressive part to me, and I wrote about this at the time, is not only do you have to understand the rules to that degree where nobody else understands, you also have to teach your players and be confident enough that they will be able to handle the situation when you call for it in a playoff game, when you've never done it before. And Bill's the only one who does that. The gap between 1 and 2 is astronomical.
I'm just trying to think, by the way, the current list of NFL head coaches you got that did not make this list, and I'm trying to think if there's a guy. Maybe Matt Nagy is an interesting one. Bill O'Brien is interesting, right?
I mean, Bill's been okay, and
he's never had a quarterback down there.
Well, he's got Deshaun Watson.
But I'm saying, and they've been very good with him.
Yeah, and there's still some room to grow, and I would say he's been above average, but I don't think he wows anybody.
Bruce Arians is back in the league.
Yeah, Bruce is a very good coach, and I considered putting him in there, but
I don't think you left anybody off, though. Now that I'm looking through, like, you got a lot of newbies. Kingsbury, Dan Quinn's been to a Super Bowl, but he don't wow you. McDermott.
Yeah, Dan was my number 11. I considered putting him in there. As I said, Matt Nagy, if he follows up on his rookie season, he'll be top 10 next year. But I want to see what he's able to do, as I said, against a first-place schedule and teams adjusting to some of the eyewash that they would constantly do with all the motion and movement. I think it'll be more difficult. And if he's able to adjust and succeed, I think that'll say a lot about him. I think Frank Reich as well. I mean, if Frank continues trending in a positive direction, I think he's going to be a top 10 coach pretty quickly. But it's tough for me to put somebody in the top 10 after 1 year.
Yeah, all right. That is the list. Check it out. John has it at JF McMullen on Twitter. Now, tomorrow we will go through the GM rankings. Now, I saw a rankings list NBC Sports did, Roto World. They put together their list of GMs in the league. So you put your list out. We will go over that list on tomorrow's show because at the top of that list, I'll give it away, Bill Belichick, number one. And I think sometimes people forget that he's even the GM of the team.
Yeah, well, I mean, GMs are a little bit tougher, as I said, because there's different setups. Sometimes the coach has more power. Sometimes it's the more traditional setup where the GM builds the roster, hands it to the coach. And obviously the GMs with the title and the power, they have more responsibility, so that weighs into it.
All right, tomorrow the GM list. We'll get to the 2 through 10. John gave you one. Bill Belichick, top of that list. We'll also compare it to the rotoworld.com, the NBC Sports list, which came out on Monday earlier in the week. We'll talk about that. And any Eagles news that happens to break or happen or that we can pontificate about, you'll hear it during Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Boardwalk Honda Hotline. At JF McMullen on Twitter, everybody. All right, man.
All right, thanks, Mike.